Beneath the ancient oaks of St. Michael's Cemetery in Charleston lie 9 graves no one in polite society wanted to discuss. The stones belong to wealthy plantation men who died between 1851 and 1855, each after a sudden paralysis, each pronounced a merciful passing. In 1923, when the cemetery was renovated, workers made a discovery the city sealed from public record: deep fingernail scratches inside coffin lids, and bodies twisted into poses of last frantic struggle. What they found next set the city's elite whispering for generations. A leather journal buried under the oldest magnolia, written in a careful hand by a man named Solomon Fairfax. It chronicled 4 years of deliberate revenge that began with a family's screams and ended with 9 men buried alive. The first entry was dated March 15, 1851. Today, I watched my wife and children burn, and I did nothing to stop it. The words did not describe literal flames. They captured the sensation of a life consumed in an instant. Charleston in the 1850s wore its wealth like a crown. White columns looked out over the Cooper River. Fortunes from rice and cotton built dynasties that imagined themselves untouchable. The city's small medical circle held outsized authority among the elite. Doctors like Cornelius Hathaway, who opened his practice on Meeting Street in 1845, treated mysterious fevers, sudden weaknesses, and strange paralytic fits. Hathaway's success owed much to an assistant, an enslaved man named Solomon Fairfax, whose deep knowledge of plants and compounds bordered on uncanny. He had learned from family healers on plantations and from observing white physicians, and he read and wrote in a time when such learning was increasingly forbidden for the enslaved. Patients asked for him by name. Before Charleston, Solomon had lived on the Pemberton plantation 15 miles out. He had a wife, Celia, and 3 children, Marcus, Samuel, and Grace. The Pembertons tolerated their family because Solomon's remedies saved lives during outbreaks that could otherwise sweep through quarters overnight. He treated snakebite and consumption, eased childbirth and fever, and even sat at the bedsides of the Pembertons themselves when they fell ill. Then came March of 1851. Edmund Pemberton's gambling debts forced a sale. He would liquidate property, including Celia and the children, sending them to different plantations. Solomon begged. He offered years of extra work with no pay, or to hire himself out at peak seasons. Pemberton refused. The sale would happen on March 14th at the Charleston slave market. A gray, heavy morning rose over the Ashley River. Solomon held his family through the night, memorizing each face, each breath. When the traders came, his loved ones were loaded into a wagon with other families about to be torn apart. Midway to the city, a wheel dropped into a deep rut. The wagon lurched. Celia pitched off and struck her head on a rock. Blood ran fast. Shackled, Solomon tried to reach her. The traders made their calculation. She was a loss. They left her in the mud and drove on. At the market, Solomon watched his children vanish. Marcus went to a rice planter up in Georgetown where boys tended dangerous sluices in alligator-haunted swamps. Samuel was sold to a cotton man from the upcountry known for working people to death. Grace, too young for the fields, was sold as a house servant in Savannah. Solomon kept his face calm because grief or rage would draw punishment on others. Inside, something cold and patient took root. Dr. Hathaway, unaware of the full horror, bought Solomon for his practice. He needed a gifted compounder. Solomon's reputation carried a price. That night, in the tiny room above the office by candlelight, Solomon began his journal. He wrote the line about watching his family burn, then added this: "I remember every face, every name, every voice that laughed as my world ended. They think they have broken me. They have taught me patience." He set himself to 2 tasks. The first was to make himself indispensable. He arrived earlier, stayed later, organized, mixed, soothed, measured. Hathaway's arthritic hands grew to rely on Solomon's steady ones. The doctor even let him handle some patients alone. The second task was quiet study. Solomon listened to the city's richest, mapped their social ties. traced who had profited from the trade that destroyed his family. He learned that the slave market worked with the blessing and investment of respectable men, church deacons, and committee chairs who discussed philosophy at dinner and profits at dawn. Among Hathaway's patients, Solomon identified 9 men who were part of that chain: bidders at the auction, financiers of dealers who specialized in breaking families, purchasers of those very lots that included his children. He began a different kind of casebook, writing their ailments, schedules, habits, and roles in a system that called his family a ledger entry. In Hathaway's library, Solomon found texts on pharmacy and toxicology, legitimate studies of compounds that could calm, numb, or mimic death. One treatise, describing a South American vine that induced total muscular paralysis while leaving the mind awake, caught his attention. Charleston's fascination with exotics had brought specimens into the greenhouse of Professor Nathaniel Crenshaw at the College of Charleston. Crenshaw, pleased by Solomon's botanical skill, let him help tend the plants. In private, Solomon experimented with mice until he knew the precise dose. Too little caused weakness, too much killed at once. The right amount locked a body still while the mind remained agonizingly alert for hours. In the 1850s, without modern tools, a doctor would read the body as a peaceful death. He chose his first target carefully: Colonel Reginald Fitzpatrick, a rich rice planter who had joked about the breeding potential of children at the sale that shattered Solomon's life. Fitzpatrick came monthly for gout. He often arrived alone. He had a weak heart, an easy story to tell when the end came. On December 15, 1852, Hathaway was tied up with another patient and told Solomon to begin the colonel's usual treatment. In the mixing room, Solomon added the invisible dose to the medication and carried it out with the same courteous steadiness that had earned him trust. The colonel swallowed. As the haze crept in, Solomon sat beside him and spoke softly. He said his name. He named the date of the sale. He told Fitzpatrick exactly what would happen. The doctor would pronounce him dead within the hour, and by tomorrow he'd be buried at St. Michael's. He would not actually die until long after the last shovelful of dirt landed. The paralysis sealed Fitzpatrick in place. His eyes told the story his mouth could not. Hathaway entered, examined, and sighed over a heart finally failed. The body went home. The funeral followed. Solomon stood in the section reserved for the enslaved and watched the coffin sink. That night he wrote, "Fitzpatrick has paid. 8 remain. Justice is patient." No one questioned the death. Solomon waited, watched the city breathe, then moved again. Judge Marcus Calverton, who had argued in court that splitting families was essential to order and profit, suffered severe migraines. In April 1853, an overstrong dose seized him faster than planned. Hathaway noticed the unusual rigidity, peered longer than he had with Fitzpatrick, then blamed a brutal stroke. Calverton went into the ground at St. Michael's, 3 rows from the colonel. At the graveside, Solomon noticed a young journalist taking notes. Thomas Grimby of the Charleston Mercury was tracking what he privately called the prominent deaths, a cluster of sudden endings among the elite that, taken together, strained belief. Solomon felt the clock speed up. Then Hathaway announced a potential junior partner, Dr. Timothy Henderson, recently trained in Philadelphia with newer forensic methods. Another physician in the office meant more eyes, more questions. Solomon realized he had to accelerate. His third target was Captain William Dandridge, a ship owner who ran human cargo along the coast and prided himself on keeping people alive just long enough to maximize return. Dandridge was rarely a patient. Solomon would have to create his opening. Through the network of enslaved cooks and butlers who traded information along the battery, he learned of a dinner on May 20th, 1853. 12 shipping men, a room full of future targets. With the help of Martha, a respected kitchen matron, Solomon slipped into the serving staff. The dining room shone with silver and crystal. The talk, easy and practiced, treated human beings like bales of cotton and timetables on a ledger. During dessert, Solomon prepared the captain's brandy-soaked cake with a perfected measure, Dandridge ate, praised the dish, and after a half hour grew dizzy. He stepped to his study for air and collapsed into his leather chair. This death did not happen in quiet. A physician among the guests examined the body and said aloud what Solomon dreaded. This looked like poison. By dawn, the city buzzed. Grimby arrived to interview witnesses and servants. His notes placed Solomon at more than one suspicious death. The net tightened. Still, 6 names remained in Solomon's book. He decided on a single dangerous strike. On June 15, 1853, 6 major slave traders were to meet after hours at Henderson and Associates to sign contracts expanding their business. The gas lamps would be lit. Solomon had spent nights preparing a concentrated form of his compound. He injected it into the building's gas line. When the jets flared, the toxin would ride the light. From the alley at 8 o'clock, he saw the windows glow. Half an hour later, silence settled. An hour after that, he entered with a duplicate key. 6 men sat frozen around the polished table, eyes alive in bodies that would not move. Solomon spoke to each, naming himself, describing precisely what they would feel when the coffin closed. Footsteps sounded in the hall. The door opened. Thomas Grimby stepped in and took in the scene. 6 motionless magnates, one calm man with a terrible confession in his eyes. "So it's true," Grimby said. "Someone has been killing Charleston's elite, and it's you." Solomon didn't deny it. He told the journalist why. Grimby, torn between truth and conscience, asked the crucial question. "They're still alive, aren't they?" Solomon nodded. He said they would know for hours the terror his children had known on the road to market. Voices rose on the stairs. Others were coming. Grimby whispered that there was a back way, that he could delay his report, give Solomon a chance to run. Solomon shook his head. 9 men had destroyed his family. He had reached only 6. He would not flee. Let them see. Let the story spread. Let someone somewhere understand that patience has limits. Constables burst in minutes later. They found 6 corpses upright in their chairs and a slave who did not resist. Solomon explained everything: the compound, the dosing, the targets, and why. His confession tied together 2 years of whispers. The trial that followed became a spectacle. The prosecutor framed it simply: a slave had murdered 9 pillars of society and must hang. The court-appointed defense attorney could not argue innocence. He argued context. He forced the city to look at how families were broken, how children were priced, how the law made it all neat. Hathaway testified about Solomon's brilliance and access to exotic plants. Doctors debated the science. The 6 men from the office, recovered before burial, described the living death they had endured, unable to blink, to breathe deep, to speak, fully conscious as loved ones wept and plans were made. Their stories made the courtroom shudder. Investigations exhumed 3 earlier victims, Fitzpatrick, Calverton, and Dandridge, and the scratch marks told the truth. Across the South, panic bloomed. Families wondered if their dead had been truly dead. New rules tightened the noose on enslaved education, especially in medicine. Forensics advanced because they had to. Solomon remained steady. He did not ask for mercy. He asked that people remember who created the circumstances that made such revenge imaginable. The jury took less than an hour. The court set his execution for October 15, 1853. Before a crowd of thousands, he spoke with the same calm he had shown throughout. 9 men had learned the fear his children felt. That knowledge made his death bearable. The system would continue. Others would suffer. And even the patient have limits. He was buried in an unmarked grave beyond city limits. His journal, copied by Grimby during the trial, quietly disappeared from official hands. Years later, the journalist buried the original beneath the magnolia in St. Michael's, near the men Solomon had sent into the earth, writing that future generations might judge the story with clearer eyes. In 1923, the renovation crew found the scratches inside 9 coffins, and the journal where Grimby had hidden it. Officials sealed the records, citing public safety and tensions, though many believed the motive was simpler: protect the names of old families. The consequences rippled anyway. Laws tightened against the education of the enslaved. Forensic medicine in America took a hard step forward, and the larger question slipped into parlors and pulpits. If a man as trusted and capable as Solomon could carry that much fury quietly, what did that say about a system built on silence? The story of Solomon Fairfax is not neat. It is a ledger written in two inks: healing and harm, patience and reckoning. It tells us that justice denied will sometimes find another path, slower, darker, more terrible, and that the past is never as buried as we pretend. If you listen under the oaks of St. Michael's, you can almost hear the earth whisper it back.